Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey there, and welcome. Good morning to you. It's a gray April 6th in Pittsburgh, PA, and have I got a provocative and, who knows, potentially life-altering show for you today. One of my all-time heroes is from a fairy tale. It's the kid who cries out, "The emperor's wearing no clothes." And that is in part what my guest, who knows, he might have been that boy, my guest, Mark Scheeren, does in his book, The Freedom Model. Now, the emperor in this case is the near monolithic 12-step program originated by AA, and now just about the only thing available to anyone trying to get a handle on any kind of unwanted habitual behavior, from drink to drugs to overeating to too much sex. Mark Scheeren blows it all up and offers a more humane alternative. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You know, to get us started, I think some personal background would be helpful as a jumping off point, because, I mean, you came to your insights and I might say your animus toward AA and 12 steps and the way rehab generally works through some personal experience, to say the least. Can you share some of that?
Sure. So I grew up in a family that was steeped in AA, self-help models, therapy, the whole sort of you're broken and you need therapy model. And I'm the youngest of 12 kids, and my parents were German immigrants, and the treatment and Alcoholics Anonymous were a huge part of the Scheeren family. And so being the youngest, I looked around and I saw how much it failed and how much it tended to cause family members to point at each other, blame each other, and slowly our family disintegrated as a result of that influence, that 12-step influence. So when I had a very serious drinking and drug problem, because I was told I would have one, right, over and over again, right, by my family and the treatment zealots in it. By the time I got myself into some real trouble, I was stuffed in rehab for 18 months after I almost killed some people drunk driving. And I just knew it didn't work. And I looked around and I was seeing people dying in treatment, and I was seeing that they were telling me that relapse was part of recovery. And I said, no other medical condition says that failure is part of the model to help somebody. That was so oxymoronic and didn't make any logical sense that I started to question the entire model.
So back up there. They say relapse is part of recovery, so that if you recover, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You will fail. They're telling you you'll fail.
That's exactly right. So they know that their model doesn't work, and it's been an abysmal failure for 80 years. And so they cook in the failure into somehow being a benefit of the model. So basically what they do is they make the bar so low for their model that you really, there's no way that it can fail. That is, that failure is part of the winning. It's so crazy what they're doing. So, yeah, it's counterintuitive, isn't it? That makes no sense.
Yeah, one of the things that's always freaked me out about AA, as I understand it, and the 12 steps is two things. One, that they start out, I guess the first step says you have to admit you're powerless. And that is something that I just, I could never admit such a thing. I could never admit that. So that's not an option for me. And then two, this idea that even if you do, and I guess this is sort of what you were saying about relapse, but even if you don't relapse, even if you haven't had a drink, let's say in 30 years, you are still an addict, according to them. You are now a recovering, and because they say recovering, it means you can never reach the end point. So you are an addict. That is who you are. And to be reduced to that is mind-blowing to me.
Well, it is mind-blowing. It's the fantasy of one man, Bill Wilson, in 1935, who said, I'm going to put the power in the drug and take the power out of the human being, take the free will away from a human being in my theory. And it was genius, really, in a diabolical way, in a sad way. Because prior to that, really nobody believed that alcohol and drugs had mystical powers to render you compelled to use them. There's some historical basis for people saying that alcohol was a bad idea in large amounts or that drugs were, but they didn't frame it as you are powerless. The drug has power. So what Bill Wilson did was he reversed reality. He literally made people believe that a substance, a lifeless substance, had the power to compel the human mind to drink it, which is really, really a religious view. It's a type of religion. It's a belief. It's not empirically true. The vast majority of people that have drinking and drug problems move past the problem. Over 91% of drinkers move past the problem with or without treatment. So this idea that we are these hapless victims at the whim of the will of alcohol and or drugs is simply factually incorrect. It's wrong.
So it creates a self-image of I am a helpless addict. I mean, I freak out because I see on Twitter all the time, people, I've been sober for, and they count the days, the months, practically the hours, and then everybody writes in and says, way to go, keep going, you can do it. And what occurs to me is, wait a minute, if alcohol was the consuming thing in your life when you were drinking it, how is it good to have it be the consuming thing in your life when you're not drinking it? Alcohol becomes, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It becomes the center of your life. So I've often said that recovery makes addicts. And boy, people freak out when I say that. But the reality is, by continuing to repeat that somehow a substance has control over me, even when I'm not doing it, is bringing your past problematic use, which I'm not denying. Trust me, I know what it's like to wake up shaking in the morning and having withdrawal. I've been there, so I understand the hopelessness. Mm-hmm. I've had suicide attempts, so I'm not downplaying that it's problematic. What I'm downplaying is this idea that we have to consume our lives with a fictitious battle as if there is this nebulous force called addiction that is rendering us compelled to use. That's simply not true. But here's where it becomes true: when we believe it. And that's the danger of the current treatment system in America today, which is based on the 12 steps. And it's this idea that your brain is broken, that your biochemistry runs your thoughts and your emotions. It does not. They have that backwards too. And that you will forever struggle and you will never be happy unless you have that substance. What a dire prediction. No wonder they frame it as a battle. But it's not objectively true. But it becomes true when you believe it. Once again, we see that this is really a religion, not a scientific method.
So you say addiction is actually a state of belief in your loss of control.
That's exactly. It's the belief in loss of control and compelled use by another agent that takes over the mind of the sufferer, and that simply isn't the case. Because here's the deal. A substance doesn't have a mind of its own. How would it know what you're thinking? How would it know what stressful thoughts you have that day? How would it know that you're going through a divorce and you want relief? How would a drug know that? on one day, and then the next day make you angry, next day make you more sexual, next day make you see, how does a drug do that? It can't. That's all us playing a game in our minds, but it's framed as if the drug is doing it. We're giving credit to the wrong thing. You should give credit to all those things to yourself and the responsibility and consequences of it to yourself as well.
So you're saying that, okay, a drug, let's say alcohol, would be the most extraordinary wonder drug in the universe if it can both cause aggression, people go nuts when they're drunk, or can be perceived as a thing, I need a drink because I'm all agitated and it will calm me. I mean, those things are opposite effects.
They are. One of the very first sociological exercises that I did when I was a young researcher, my research mentor, Jerry Brown, the architect, really, the original architect of the Freedom Model, he said, I want you to go down to the Union Inn in Schenectady for the entire day. Tell the bartender you're doing a study. You're going to sit in the corner booth and you're going to record everything, the behavior, the amount of drinks, to the best of your ability, everything that's happening in that bar. And I said, why am I doing this? He said, you'll understand. And so I did that. And it was 8 hours, and I came back with the report. And he said, so tell me about the behavior in the bar. And I said, well, we had one guy drowning his sorrows, another woman being hysterical. We had a group of frat boys with some girls playing darts in the corner being really ridiculous. I noticed that a guy and a girl went in the bathroom and had sex, and there was a fight outside. There was actually a fight. There was actually two cops who were after hours. They got in an argument. And they went outside and had a fight. It was a tussle. It wasn't a full blown fight, but he had him on the car, and it was crazy. So I said, why did you have me study all this? And he said, Mark, how can a drug do all of that? How can it make people behave in all these absolutely opposite and varied ways? That would be a marvelous drug. That would be the most important. And honestly, if it gave us the powers to do all of these things that we ordinarily wouldn't do, my God, everybody should be drinking and living their fantasies. And he made it humorous. But the point was, it's not the drug. It's our belief in the drug, our license to misbehave in Western culture.
Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned culture. So our culture seems to be particularly troubled by drugs and alcohol. I don't know what it is about our culture, but other cultures handle it differently. I mean, it's well known that in Italy, people love to drink. It's part of but they don't have the same, they don't have the same kind of alcohol problems there. They don't have people doing rehab all the time. What is it? What's the cultural aspect of it, or the environmental aspect of it?
Well, it's massive. I'm glad you brought this up. And I'm glad you brought up Italy, because that's an example I use a lot. So the Italian people drink about the same as we do, a little bit more per capita, and they start younger. And they drink more regularly. So on a volume percentage per capita basis, they drink more. And so you have a people that drink more, younger, in more volume, and yet they don't have the problems that we do. So is there some massive genetic code difference? Well, there isn't. We have plenty of Italians here that drink problematically. And so in America, we drink problematically very differently. We have a license to misbehave. We believe that alcohol, we lose control. So really what drives this, and what has driven this right after the Industrial Revolution, is this idea that alcohol is magic. It's the advertising. When we're young kids, we learn that if we drink Budweiser, we'll have washboard abs, a girl will have the perfect figure, and it'll be a beach scene. Now, what's ironic is that plays itself out in Daytona Beach every spring at spring break. It's a total shitshow, So that advertising, as one example, is the belief that alcohol allows me to go crazy and behave sexually in different ways, to get aggressive or get morose or get funny or be outgoing or dance better. And so the magic, the supposed magic, is cooked into the advertising. For liquor companies, it's the paneled room, and we all become lawyers and women in black dresses, right? And we look beautiful. It's very sophisticated. And so what happens, but it really centers around this idea, this cultural idea of the license to misbehave that other cultures don't have.
Huh. So, geez, other cultures really don't have that? I mean, come on, the Irish do, don't they?
Yes, the Irish do. The Irish have a very, yes, the Irish and the English do. The English are very closely associated with what they have in America. So their norms, their drinking norms are similar to ours. The Irish are similar to ours, but sort of worse because they're a culture that generally, in a lot of ways, has lost for centuries to other cultures. Yes. And so they've cooked in this sort of melancholy attitude toward drinking. They even have songs about it. Like if you go to an Irish bar, they call it the Fighting Irish, right? Everybody drinks whiskey and they have songs about losing, and they have a romanticized sort of view about alcohol, and that's get drunk, get morose, let's get busy and fight, and that's the way they drink. So it really all comes down to what is your cultural norm, and then that cooks in the misinformation about alcohol and the magical powers, or the absence of them in different cultures, right? I mean, some cultures, Germany is sort of on the cusp. They have some license to misbehave, but they have a lot more formalized drinking. And as you go down to Spain and Italy, it becomes less problematic.
Okay. So if AA and 12 steps is totally wrong, what's the freedom model? You turn it all on its head.
Yeah, I do. Well, first of all, a lot of the freedom model is what we've been talking about, which is clarifying the misinformation, getting rid of the misinformation to the person that's learning. So as they go through the program, in one way or another, we have all sorts of different ways that we can do that with people from home or at our retreat, things like that. We get rid of the misinformation. We have to sweep away the mythology. So we have to basically put a stake through the heart of the religion of addiction and recovery, okay, based on the misinformation. So that's probably 3/4 of what I have to do with somebody over the course of 3 to 4 weeks. It's a tremendous amount of misinformation. Yeah. And so we go through all the different research, the angles, all of it. But then we also show them that they're capable, and this is really important, that humans are capable of changing their mind, because ultimately what makes people stop drinking and drugging, and almost everybody does, by the way, as we get older, we let go of addictions. That's simply a fact. It's called natural remission. So as people get older, they naturally change and evolve. And what we do at the Freedom Model is we make that evolution happen quicker. We just give them all the information so they can make an educated decision. And then they look at the benefits of changing their mind and making different decisions. And then they do, because they naturally want the benefits of getting rid of this problem in their life. So that's it in a nutshell, but there's a lot to that, obviously.
Yeah. Mark, we've got callers that people are calling in. Can we just break away for a second and let them ask their questions?
I would love that. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, caller. Go ahead.
Oh, is that me?
Yes, you.
It's me. Strange. I just turned this on, but I don't know. This is. I don't agree with everything this person is saying. My own addiction was nicotine. Okay, and I've only been past it for 10 years. And I want to ask him, like something like nicotine. Okay. My understanding, and I believe this, is that it changes neural pathways. They say that nicotine is harder to get off of in a way than even heroin, because once you have these neural pathways change, the minute you reintroduce, your brain, some sort of biology, wants to go right back there. I could believe this. I have the willpower to stay away from it, but I see there are dangerous situations. So there is something, that's where, to say that it's not totally biological, I believe that people can get over this. I've had friends, family, 50 years ago, drug addiction, who have really very successfully overcome this. And now people say, oh, they're having a drink. And I'm like, well, you know what? They've been past this for 50 years and they can have a drink. You know, it's not this religion that once you get over your addiction, you're tied to this life of whatever. And I have so many things with what this gentleman is saying. A good friend of mine is French.
Yeah.
And you know what? Who's an alcoholic. And the interesting thing is that, you know, and we've been friends for 50 years. The French romanticize. They are totally different. They think Americans are crazy with this, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous and this and that, because they feel that the French, they romanticize, you know, culturally. We don't romanticize in the same way that this is some sort of like intellectual, like freedom or, you know, a spiritual, it's this spirit that drives people to drink. It's a demon here. So this cultural. You've thrown so much in.
I know. Let's, Mark, do you want to take a whack at all of that?
I can. I think I memorized it.
Okay.
First of all, you're very close to understanding a lot of what we're talking about here. And I'm glad you don't agree completely, because that's how we learn, right? So smoking is the most quit substance on the planet. And yet,
the most what substance?
It's the most quit substance.
Okay.
So nicotine is the most quit substance on the planet Earth. So we have two narratives that are happening. Here's reality. Most people that smoke don't smoke for a lifetime. We know that. And yet we tell people it's the hardest thing to quit in the world when it's the most quit substance. So what's the truth? Well, I look at just the evidence and I say, wait. So most people quit the substance when their brain has been most changed by the nicotine. So the brain changes don't drive addiction. Your mind does. Your desire to feel relief of mild nicotine withdrawal. So you frame that as relief, and so you smoke. So eventually you say to yourself, it's not worth it, and your mind makes the difference. Now, those neural pathways will sit on a shelf, and if you were to smoke, they would be reactivated. But the point is, you have to make the decision. So you're not run by your brain chemistry. You never were. The fact that you quit showed you, it demonstrated that your mind is capable of superseding any brain chemistry changes that have happened. So we have lots of brain changes that happen in substance users, and yet over 96% of heroin users, as an example, quit for good. Did you know that? Most people
I would
don't
believe
know that.
I would believe that.
Yeah, very, very, very few are lifelong users. And people say, well, everybody's dying. No, they're not. We've had a very consistent, until COVID, we had a very consistent number of overdoses. They just got a lot of fanfare. I'm not downplaying the tragedy of overdose. I've lost many friends through that. But the point is, when you look at, most people get past these problems. So what we do is we point to the biology all the time, and yet over 99% of methamphetamine users get over the problem. 98% of cocaine users get over the problem. 96% of heroin users get over the problem. 91% of alcohol users get over the problem. So why aren't we talking about that? So
right, and here's another interesting point. I throw this at you. I've thought of this and have talked with many people about things like this. The friend that was a pain physician. Part of the problem is, why are certain people not able to get off? And a lot of times it's because why are they using? And it is because of pain. On what level? Physical. And a lot of people experience pain differently. We do not understand why and how people experience pain.
Caller, I want to suggest that you and Mark could talk for the next 5 hours.
We could. I'll go. I'm going to go.
Yeah, no. Get his book. Get his book, The Freedom Model. Go to thefreedommodel.org and find out all the ways you can access this. I'm serious. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will.
It's a great call.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Great call. Mark. Bye. Mark, did you want to? Did you want to respond to? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have another caller?
Yeah, we do. Actually, the other caller hung up. Okay. No problem. It occurs to me this is such a huge topic. I'm also going to bet that there are people who are hearing what you're saying and they're feeling angry and perhaps defensive because they themselves or a loved one was helped by AA, or you know what I mean. So what do you say to them?
I do. Okay, let me pull in some compassion here. Facts sometimes shatter our belief systems, and that can be really, really difficult. And try to understand that I came from a complete immersion in AA, and it took me 12 years to figure out all this stuff that we're talking about. I went to over 3,000 AA meetings in my lifetime as a researcher and as a member in the early years, because try to remember, when I started all this, there was no freedom model formed. We were just trying to figure it out. So I've been on your side of the fence. I've been confused. I gave AA credit at one time and rehab credit for my sobriety. And then suddenly I realized really it had nothing to do with it. It had to do with me making a decision. So what I would say is that every single human being that has ever decided to abstain or moderate their drinking or drugging has done it the identical way. They found that they were happier in not using or moderating. So the point is, you can give credit to AA for that, but ultimately you're the only one in there. You're the only autonomous creature with a mind of your own. And whether you're going to give credit to some external meeting, some church basement meeting, or whether you give yourself credit, really is inconsequential. What you really should say to yourself is, this is my decision. This is my decision. This is the decision I made. There's no magic in an AA meeting. There's no magic at rehab. There's not even any magic in the freedom model. There's just information and then deciding what would make you happier. And every single human being that has ever stopped drinking and drugging the evidence is there. They found that they were happier at some level in doing that. So you can give credit to AA if you want, but you don't have to, because it's just you. So give yourself credit. AA sort of teaches you not to give yourself credit. I mean, I would think. Otherwise, how are you going to keep coming back? Our caller is back. Caller, go ahead, please.
Hey, Lynn, this is Roger, and I'm sorry I'm calling 2 days in a row, but this is a very thorny but interesting subject to me.
Sure.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my dad, he became sober when I was a teenager, and AA, I mean, it probably saved his life. But I saw its pitfalls, because I thought he just traded one addiction for another. He went to AA meetings 6 to 7 nights a week for probably the first 20 years of his sobriety. And I know my younger brother is 10 years younger than me. I have 5 older sisters. They were mostly out of the house. I was a teenager, so my brother was under 10. And, I'm going to college. I have a job. And I found out much later that he was being left alone at night so my mom could go to Al-Anon and my dad could go to AA meetings. And that was just, they couldn't help themselves. He had to do it. And while I think it saved his life, I don't think it ever addressed the real problems. It's very surface oriented. Can you let Mark respond to it? Because that's a big thing you just said. Can you let Mark respond to that? Sure.
Please. Okay.
It's Roger, right? Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Okay, Roger, I was that young kid. I was the youngest of 12 kids, and my mom actually met a man in AA and left when I was 7 with him, and that became my stepfather. And my sisters, I have 7 sisters, and they never knew their mother. My brothers never knew my mom because she was always gone. And I can remember her saying, "My recovery is more important." And then we would have, she would 12-step, meaning she would pass the message of AA on. And we would have these strange people at Christmas in our house and strange people living in our house. And yet we were neglected, severely neglected. And that was that was part of the reason, as I looked around as a child and as I grew older, I said, this doesn't make sense. And at that time, I was probably pretty hurt and pissed off and lonely, and a very not very well-adjusted young man, because I didn't have parents. You know, my father had to work to raise the kids and feed us. And it was really awful what AA did, and it splintered our family into pieces. And I see this all over the place when they say, well, you have to make recovery number one. I've seen marriages be destroyed. I've seen some really awful sides to this. When you say that AA saved his life, maybe it was more your father just decided that the meetings made him happier than other parts of his life, and it was his escape. I don't know. I don't know your dad. And that's unfortunate for the people around, but I know it was for my mom. Now, as an adult, I'm just going to try to tie this up. As an adult, I came to grips with the fact that that was my mom's choice, and she's a lady. She's just a person. And I had to accept the fact that that made her happier. And that my childhood was affected, but I had to move on from that. So it is thorny and painful, but it's unfortunate because it's not necessary.
Well, doesn't it sounds like Roger's father just traded one addiction. I think, Roger, you suggested that, for another, the addiction of alcohol to the addiction of having to every night, instead of drinking, going to these meetings.
I don't want to paint too bleak of a picture on his sobriety. I mean, it was much better to have him around sober than drunk.
Sure.
But I became more sensitive to this years later after I became a parent, and how much I felt I had to be present. You know, I didn't have time to get drunk. I didn't have time to go play softball games every night. You know, I had to be present and be there for my family. And I've seen other parents who are dealing with addiction issues, and they get sober. And like, I thought you said it perfectly. This is my job in my life is now to be sober. And like, no, it's not. Do you want to stay sober? Fine, but don't make that the end all be all, because you're talking about you want to talk about giving control to something. You're still giving control to alcohol.
That's right.
That's right. It, Roger. That's why the title of my book, the tagline, is "Escape the Treatment and Recovery Trap." The recovery trap is just as vicious sometimes as the addiction can be, and that is that people give themselves. AA, what you say at an AA meeting before every single AA meeting in the preamble and how it works, the portion at the beginning, is that you must give yourself completely to the simple program. That's strong cult-like language. That's where you get into a realm that gets a little bit weird. Give myself completely to the simple program. Well, what about family? What about career? What about moving on from a drinking problem? Right?
Yes, but here's the other thing, though, that I think people need to remember is there wasn't much out there for the common man, somebody who wasn't rich. I mean, Bill W. came out with something, and it probably straightened a lot of people out. So I don't want to just beat up on AA. It has its point, but at the same time, you've got the rest of your life. And it's just like exercising all the time. Well, no, you got to go take care of your family. Regarding what you said earlier about, certain cultures, you talked about like the Irish and this, that.
Sure.
There was a journalist named Peter Hamill who died a couple of years ago.
Sure.
And he was asked this question about the Irish, because he was Irish and, drinking. And he says, you will find any conquered society or culture, and the British conquered the Irish, and just like we conquered the people who lived here before this continent was discovered. And you see it in Russia with what's been going on there for centuries. People just, I think, go into despair.
Yeah,
and
they do.
It's not a cultural, it becomes a cultural
it is
identity.
cultural. Yeah,
but it was forced on them. I mean, they probably wouldn't have these problems if people didn't try, just didn't take over their lives. And regarding the how we deal with alcoholism in this country is terrible, because I was like Alejandro Villanueva used to be an offensive lineman for the Steelers. He was an Army brat, and he was educated in Europe. And he says, I'm 12 years old, and we're drinking wine at dinner time. He says, then I go to college. And he says, and all these people are going crazy, getting drunk. Says, now he's like, what's the big deal? And it's America does have a problem with this.
Yeah.
We do need to address it.
Roger, I'm gonna let you. Great call. Thank you. Yeah, you do talk too much, but a great call. Great call.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I just want to, Lynn, if I could just address one quick thing that he mentioned, and that is about the conquered peoples. While conquered peoples sometimes get drinking norms based on their pain, many conquered don't. And then you have America, which has the highest standard of living. We really don't have that much to complain about, contrary to what we hear all the time. And yet we have a tremendous drinking and drug problem. And there are plenty of rich, well-adjusted drunks and addicts right out there. So we can't count on the pain equation as being the cause of use. So we have to be careful about that. That's the only point I wanted to make.
Okay. You in your book quote Pascal, the French philosopher and I guess mathematician and whatever the hell he was. And I've reduced it, but I so love this quote. All men seek happiness. This is the motive of every action of every man, even of those who hang themselves.
Yeah. Yes. I wanted that.
It's true.
It is true. I coined the phrase positive drive principle, and what that means is that all human beings are just trying to be happy, and our pursuit of happiness is what motivates us. And I put that quote in because it's so clean and unequivocal, and it says it right down, because people almost always go to, when I say that, they say, well, not everybody, Mark. I mean, people that kill themselves, they weren't happy. They weren't driving for happiness. And having had two suicide attempts, I can attest to the fact, and when you interview survivors, when you are about to kill yourself, you feel relieved. You feel relieved that it's over. And that's a sad commentary on where I was, and it's a sad commentary on where everybody is that's there. But you don't see another option. And so the happiness is in the end. Now, I hope that nobody feels that way, because I know how dark that is. But my point is that even then, you're still motivated. Your psyche, your thoughts, your ideas is all about, how can I be happier in every moment of my life? From the way you're sitting right now to the cup of coffee you're having, or maybe when you're driving to work to a job you seemingly hate, it's better than not having that job, So that's an important principle when we look at drinking and drugging, because people tend to say, I don't know why I do this. Well, yes, you do, because you find benefit in it.
So everything is a choice.
Everything is a choice, and it is always motivated by the pursuit of some type of benefit or happiness. Every time we stick a needle in our arm, every time we speedball, every time we smoke crack, every time it doesn't matter. Every shot of liquor we've ever taken had one motive, and that is, I want to be happier. Now, you might be miserable. Your life might be way down in the dumps. But every time you drink or drug, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. There is no loss of control. The only time there is loss of control is when we are unconscious, meaning there is no thought. When we are face down in the ditch. And I've been there many times, so I understand unconsciousness and overdose. So, yeah.
So, well, what about, though, people who say, look, I smoke some pot and I'm happier. The world is brighter, and I laugh more readily, and I'm more creative. Or I have a drink, and it's the only way I can really navigate through a social situation, because I have social anxiety.
Sure.
Well, are these drugs doing those things?
Right. So is that a pharmacological or biological effect of the drug that it makes you more comfortable, smarter, more creative, and that? Well, the answer is no. We can't find, there's no scientific evidence that shows that drugs do that. So what drugs do is make us feel physically different in all kinds of various ways, depending on the drug. And when we feel the physical effect, we marry the cultural ideas to that sensation. And so in America, if you're 25 and at college, you get drunk and then you feel like you can go hit on the girls easily, right? And hook up, quote unquote. And where normally you probably wouldn't just go do that. But it's not the acetaldehyde, which is what alcohol breaks down into, in our body that makes me go talk to the girl. They have it backwards. What it is that I feel the sensation of heat, numbness, sloppiness in the brain and my body, and then I interpret that with the mind as I'm going to go hit on that girl or that guy. And so this is a nuanced.
Wait. Is that that sounds like, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting because that sounds like a placebo effect.
Yes, it's what's called an active placebo, meaning there is something that happens. People get angry at me and they say, so you're saying that drugs do nothing? And I said, I've never said that. You're talking to a guy that's done massive amounts of drugs. They do. Yes, the active placebo is there's an effect in the body, and sometimes a very profound effect, sometimes a tragic effect. Okay. So there is definitely an effect in the body. And then our mind interprets that active placebo, meaning there's the sensation, as it is a placebo, and it interprets it as whatever we want, whether it's fight outside the bar, drown our sorrows, not pay bills that day, go on a binge in a hotel and forget the world, however we want to interpret it. And, but no, the pharmacological effect of alcohol and or drugs does not cause behavior. It doesn't. It's a placebo, that a sensation we find in our body, and then we interpret that in cultural ways.
Well, it occurs to me, I watch a lot of these old movies on Turner Classic Movies, and I watch them, and it's just amazing how they teach us about alcohol being the thing you do. People are drinking, well, they did it with cigarettes too. Alcohol and cigarettes, they showed us this is how you're sophisticated. This is what you do if you want to, let it all hang out. And we're learning this stuff all the time, let alone the advertising that's coming at us. So right?
Yeah, it's built into our culture in a massive push. Everything from health class telling little kids that if you smoke pot, you'll be a crackhead the next day, to advertising that shows us that every time you drink a beer, it's going to be spring break. To those classic movies are really a formula that the booze companies and the cigarette companies and now drug companies use. So because it worked. It created a drinking norm where about 80% of the alcohol in America is drank by 20% of the population of drinkers. So it creates heavy drinking. That's what it does. And it's designed to do that.
I'm recalling how President Eisenhower, when he left office in the early 50s, warned about the military-industrial complex. And it occurs, and he was right. What occurs to me is we now have like a pharmacological recovery industry complex. This is a huge business, isn't it now?
It's $45 billion in America a year. So that's treatment and now supposed, addiction medicine. And yet, here's what's wild and sad. And yet our overdose rates run increasing in parallel to the increase in treatment. So for 30 years, I said treatment makes addicts, and people freak out. They can't believe I would say such a thing. But yet that's what all the data shows. Yet we keep clamoring for more and more and more of the same. Let's tell people they're biologically hooked. Let's tell them that their brain is hijacked by drugs. Let's tell people that in recovery they'll never be happy without the drugs. And so now we have different types of drugs that the pharmaceutical companies are producing, which is essentially heroin light, right? You have Suboxone, methadone, and all naltrexone, Vivitrol, all these drugs. And people are just cycling between the drug of their choice and these other medications, and it's become a nightmare for a lot of people. Now, there's value to some of that. For instance, for Suboxone, if you want to detox off of heroin, it's a worthy tool. And for short-term replacement of heroin, Suboxone works if you're in a community that's filled with fentanyl and people are dying all around you. Probably a good idea if you don't want to quit heroin to do Suboxone instead with your doctor. Good idea, but it's a temporary bridge. But right now what we're doing is we're pushing it as a lifetime lifestyle because we're teaching people they're too weak to stop. And so they'll always need these medications. So now we're in a realm where the pharmaceutical companies, the guy on the corner, the government, all of it is tied into a massive system of funding to keep people hooked.
You know, I was thinking that because it's not just, okay, it's our criminal justice system is hooked into this. Our political system is hooked into this. Our medical system is hooked into this. And these are all the so-called experts. These are the people who run. How does anyone escape this complex? And it's just amazing. And you're suggesting that it's based on something that is just flat out wrong.
Yeah. Well, what you just described, the complex itself has been churning now for 80 years since Bill Wilson came up with the idea of personifying drugs, right? So if we, and here's the crazy part, we keep doing more and more of this. And like I started with, the overdose rates haven't gone down, they've gone up.
Really? I mean, as we've done all this, are you kidding? I mean, that's really true. That we've, attacked the problem, we've made war on drugs, war on alcohol, and built this huge complex. The problem has gotten worse, not better.
Yeah. Yes, I have a whole piece on that in the book. Yeah, it's gotten worse, and it's directly in parallel. As we increase treatment, as we keep teaching people that they're broken and will forever need treatment, and it's a dire prediction, people don't stay sober with that idea because fear and depression do not generate a real motivation to change. It never will work. It will never work. It's against human nature. So we need to tell the truth, which is that you're totally capable from birth of getting over any addiction, and it doesn't matter how severe it is. And if we taught that, if we literally stopped everything we were doing and we just taught that, we would see a massive improvement in overdose rates within 5 years. We know that because in places where they don't hold on to the disease concept, they don't have the problem. Not to the severity we do. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Well, may I argue that there's no money to be made if people are not drinking, drugging, and in need of then rehab from their drinking and drugging and that circle going on. There's no money to be made, Mark. Well,
that's it. You have so many. You named the systems that are tied together. It is a giant complex, right? And like I said, it's $45 billion is a lot of money. I mean, that's a lot of money for one country to spend to keep a paradigm in a failure cycle. It makes no sense, except for that it generates tremendous cash, but it also drains our country of cash in the same way.
But, we have there's experts, there's doctors, MDs, there's research they have, all of this. Are you saying these guys don't know what they're talking about?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I am saying that. I am saying that they don't know what they're talking about. They're tied into a system that generates research that isn't research at all. It's just a narrative that they keep repeating. And a lot of them don't know. They haven't read the other research that proves it different. They're also not sociologists. You really need to be a sociologist to understand human behavior. This isn't a medical problem. Now, there is a medical aspect to it, and that's detox, which is, I would never go against detox, save millions of lives, billions of lives throughout history. So, but what we're talking about is making a choice, not the detox part, not the medical aspect of it. So, no, they don't know. Most of them don't know the studies that we discussed. The good news is there's a lot of researchers now who are publishing. Stanton Peele, Carl Hart is great. Jeffrey Shaler, amazing. I mean, these guys have been at this longer than I have, and I've been doing this for 32 years. So, and there's many others. Gene Heyman, great sociologists and psychologists that know the truth. And basically, I took a lot of their research, to give them credit, and put it into one book, along with my qualitative and quantitative research that we put into the Freedom Model. It's just a massive book where I took everything that's out there and gave people a method to change.
How should, people have these interventions for family members that they're fearful are, being lost to them through some kind of substance abuse. And then they ship them off to one of these rehabs, often at huge expense that they can really barely afford. What should a family member do if they're concerned? What do you do if that's not the right thing to do?
Yeah. So let's talk about interventions quick, and then I'll tell you the answer to that. So interventions can be, we're talking about the sort of confrontational ambush where the family gets together with a professional, and then the professional basically sends the kid or the loved one to a rehab that's the highest bidder, and they get a kickback on that. So that's how that system works. It's really, really, not everybody's getting the kickback, but there's finder's fees and there's all kinds of deals that are made monetarily. I have to say to the side also, most professionals care about people out there. So I don't want to paint a picture of this diabolical sort of scenario. Most just don't know that what they're teaching is wrong. So let me say that. And so the answer is we have an entire program actually for the family. It's called Freedom Model for the Family, and you can get it for $39 a month. And we can teach you how to talk with your loved one and how to have a conversation. And also, the family needs to know that the person is choosing this for themselves, even though it might be painful. And the family needs to know that they actually don't have that much control over the situation. They only have control over themselves and their life and their household. And so there's a lot of nuance to dealing with a loved one. And I could not possibly go through all of it in this call. But there is a method that's much more sane, much more calm, and that doesn't involve telling somebody that they're basically a guilty, miserable person to be around, and that they better do this or they're going to die kind of approach. There's a lot better way to say, hey, did you know that you could get past this and be happy and move on with your life? And you don't have to go to meetings. You don't have to be in therapy the rest of your life. You don't have to frame it as a battle. It doesn't have to be one. What a wonderful thing to tell somebody. And when you tell people those things, because they're true, people naturally come to an agreement.
So it would seem that if somebody is coerced into getting help, they're not going to have a good outcome.
No, they're not. They're simply not, because you can't force people to do things beyond their will. That, as a matter of fact, you'll probably engender heavier use after they get out of rehab, which is why overdose rates and suicides are so dramatically higher within 6 months after treatment.
Oh, gosh. It's just mind-blowing to me that we are so married to something that is not working, and that what you're saying is considered heresy. It's mind-blowing. You offer a program that is optimistic, that is about a person's free will, And you say in the book that free will is an absolute. Either you have it or you don't.
That's right. So if you're a person that says, I think I have free will, sometimes I do, but when it comes to drugs and alcohol, I don't. Well, that would be a very strange drug. That would be a drug that can somehow go into your mind and change your mind for you. That means it has intelligence. And now we're getting back into that religious view of it, right? So, you either are a chooser or you're not. Now, you can decide to believe that you don't have free will. Lots of determinists do that. It doesn't make it so. You're choosing. I mean, that's just a reality. Everything you do, you're choosing. So, yeah. And you're choosing your habit.
Right. When you mention your mind, I think a lot of people think your mind is in your brain, and this stuff affects your brain. So how can you say that?
Well, the drugs affect the physical brain, but a brain doesn't think, it doesn't know, it doesn't feel emotion, all of that is in the mind. I asked the question of a researcher, a neuroscientist years ago, 3 decades ago. I said, how does the brain create thought, decisions? And I said, does anybody know what a decision is? Does it have substance? And boy, this is a world-renowned neuroscientist. And he said, you're asking a question I've never been asked before. I said, you've never been asked that? He said, no, I've never been asked that before. He goes, I think, he literally said this. He goes, I think it's just electrical, chemical things happening in the brain. I said, is it random? That means that there's no intelligence, there's no software. And then I started to realize by doing research that goes back thousands of years, literally, that the mind and brain are two separate things. The mind runs the brain, not the other way around. All your experiences, your emotions are in the mind. And when you have a spurious thought or a new idea, it processes in this bloody thing in your skull, and then you're able to act it out in the physical world. So you're basically taking the metaphysical ideas and converting them into physical action. And then there's a back and forth between your mind and your brain. So yeah, your brain is affected. That's the active placebo of drug effects. And the mind is the interpretation of that experience.
And the mind is not a physical thing.
That's correct. It's your ideas. We all have them. And now nobody will say what the mind is because it is, after all, metaphysical.
It doesn't exist in a physical form. It's like your soul, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not even going to go out on a limb and say what it is. I just know that I am a thinking creature and I choose. That's what I tell people all the time. And then they go, yeah, I guess I am too. Yeah.
So yes, you and you alone have control of your mind, and that's that.
That's exactly right.
So the freedom model. Now, there is a book, and I'm going to suggest I got the book through an independent bookstore. I asked them to order it. They didn't have it in. It came in very quickly. I like to avoid Amazon because Jeff Bezos doesn't need your damn money. Okay, so go to an independent bookstore. The Freedom Model. Mark Scheeren, Scheeren, and thefreedommodel.org. And Mark, we should say that you offer, as you mentioned, you offer things, online? There's no group crap. It's all, sort of one-on-one-ish, right? What are some of the things you are offering?
We have our retreat where people come, and that's if you need your life to stop for a while and you want to learn the freedom model, it usually takes 3 to 4 weeks. So we do that. We've been doing that for 32 years. Then we have one-on-one over Zoom where you can learn with one of our certified instructors, and you have 12 classes with us, and we go through the curriculum that way. Then we also we just launched on April 1st, Freedom Model International, which is a membership for $39 where you get all of our online programs, the entire Freedom Model online program, the Freedom Model for the Family, which is a total of 85 video tutorials pre-recorded, and the entire program. You get books, audio books for $39 a month, and you can stop at any time. You can suspend your membership when you don't need it anymore and move on with your life. So there's all those options now, and all of them can be found at thefreedommodel.org.
Wow. Well, I want to say, I think you have it here. I just think it's smart as hell. And for all of those that are like me, who've always been creeped out. And you acknowledge it's like a cult, the AA thing. My name is so-and-so, and I am an alcoholic, and I am powerless, and higher powers, and having all these people, it's such a personal thing. I can't imagine it. I cannot imagine. There's got to be a lot of people who have been looking for help, and because of the way we do this, they can't find it. You offer help.
Yeah. We offer help, and we've helped over 25,000 people in the last 32 years. So, yeah. Yep. There are a lot of people out there that want this.
I love it. Thank you so much for this. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on, Lynn. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So, guys, I told you, provocative, and maybe, life-altering. I think this guy's got it dead to rights. Just reading the book has changed my sense of, I've always talked about smoking pot and drinking and this and that, has changed my sense of control about these things. It's a smart book, The Freedom Model. Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.